Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 has been popping off lately, especially with the most recent fight of Yuji vs Mahito. And with Mahito doing his thing and reaching his known peak, I thought it'd be fun to bring back an old matchup that people used to love to discuss, Mahito vs Shigaraki. And it's a popular matchup for a reason, one touch and you're dead villains who we see grow in strength parallel to their protagonist. Honestly, just in general, people love comparing these two, so let's talk about who would win in a fight because I think it's actually pretty interesting. But before getting into it, this video is sponsored by Gojo vs Makima, the animation. More about that at the end of the video. Now, Shigaraki vs Mahito. Shigaraki has a lot of powers at his disposal, but the quirk he's most known for and loves to use is decay. Anything he touches crumbles to dust, and since Season 5, anything that touches anything he touches also crumbles into dust. Mahito, in turn, has the cursed technique Idol Transfiguration. You see, in Jujutsu Kaisen, the body is shaped after the soul, so if the soul changes, the body follows suit. Idol Transfiguration allows Mahito to change the shape of the soul of anyone that he touches, which includes just changing it to the point of taking lethal damage. And while they both have plenty of moves in a fight, those are their most reliable skills. In most situations, one touch equals death. However, this is not necessarily the case here. Let's start with the obvious. Decay isn't a one-shot here. Due to Mahito's technique, he can also change the shape of his own soul to heal any damage. Unless an attack also damages his soul, it's as if he never took that damage to begin with. It doesn't even matter if he's totally crushed as displayed by Nanami. As long as his soul exists, the body can be reformed. So decay, which completely destroys the body, isn't quite effective. So you're probably thinking right now, oh, then Mahito wins, no diff, easy fight. Except not quite, because Mahito's technique might not work as well, which brings us to a rather complicated question. Do MHA characters have souls? You see, soul manipulating abilities are not uncommon in Battle Shonen. You have Pain from Naruto who could rip souls out of people. Big Mom from One Piece can manipulate souls to an extent. The issue is, My Hero Academia characters are never demonstrated to outright have souls. They don't have a confirmed spiritual essence that is beyond physical form. Yes, there are the quirk vestiges, but this is still described as a physical phenomena, a part of someone's quirk factor in their genes that manifests as a form of their consciousness. So then, does Mahito's technique just not work on Shigaraki? Well, not necessarily. Mahito has an interesting exchange with Kenjaku about their techniques treating the soul differently, and Mahito suggests that it doesn't have to be the same for everyone. Now, we don't necessarily have to take this conversation as 100% fact, since it is just speculation between characters, but this would imply that it doesn't matter if someone has a soul for Mahito's technique to work. This implies that it operates on its own internal logic regardless of the reality around him. But again, this is based on speculation. Taking it as a straight-up fact might not be quite right. But let's go with that idea for now, that Mahito can indeed win the fight with one touch. What are Shigaraki's win conditions then? Well, in this case, Shigaraki has only one win condition, because if you can't damage Mahito's soul, your only option is to keep on damaging him until he runs out of stamina. Then he's unable to use his technique and he can't heal the damage to his body, which is essentially death. But how long would that take? Well, Shigaraki does have the benefit of total bodily destruction. We can assume that reforming the body completely does take a bit more stamina from Mahito than just healing a normal injury. Although it's hard to tell exactly what kind of stamina that Mahito has because most of his fights are against people who bypass his normal invincibility. For all we know, it might take thousands of times of getting dusted for it to finally stick, which isn't an ideal scenario for Shigaraki. So with all of this information, for this fight, I think that there's 3 ways of looking at it, and we'll go into all of them and who wins. The first one is that Shigaraki doesn't have a soul, so neither of them can one-shot the other. In this case, it's an actual fight, since Shigaraki has to keep attacking Mahito to overwhelm his stamina, and Mahito also has to keep laying on the damage to get through Shigaraki's insane regeneration. It's hard to say who would have the better stamina here, but Shigaraki definitely has the advantage everywhere else. We already covered how easy it would be to land Decay, which would probably force Mahito into a form where he's constantly airborne, but Shigaraki also has better abilities overall. Shigaraki also has ranged attacks like Air Cannon, and probably one of his most impressive quirks would be Search, which just straight up gives him information on people he's looking at, like their weaknesses. This gives Shigaraki a good edge in actual combat. This isn't to mention the difference in speed between them. I mean, Shigaraki should be somewhat relative to Deku, who was able to dodge a sound-based attack from Jiro at a fraction of his power when he was exhausted from fighting for several days. Meanwhile, Mahito should be relative to Yuji, who barely managed to react to a supersonic attack. Now, none of this is to say that Mahito would be helpless or anything. His ability to change his soul shape gives him an insanely high number of attack options. Plus, his ability to produce clones and send out a wave of disposable minions makes him a lot harder to land hits on. So overall, this would be a very debatable fight. The second way of looking at this fight is that Shigaraki doesn't have a soul, but Mahito's technique operates purely on its own internal logic. In this case, Mahito just wins. It gives him the absolute benefit of the doubt. Despite any of Shigaraki's advantages, it just takes one touch for him to go down, and with how strategic Mahito can be, it's only a matter of time for him to pull that off. The third way of looking at this fight is that Shigaraki does have a soul, or we're counting quirk vestiges as something equivalent. And this is the reverse of option 2 because it's giving Shigaraki the absolute benefit of the doubt. In this case, Shigaraki would be able to damage Mahito's soul similar to Yuji, since having multiple vestiges would, by Jujutsu Kaisen's logic, make it so Shigaraki knows the shape of his soul. In this case, both Shigaraki and Mahito would be able to one-shot each other with their main abilities, and it just depends on who lands the first hit. And that would almost always be Shigaraki. On top of having a speed disadvantage, Mahito would probably get hit by the first decay wave anyway, since he would not be expecting it to hurt him. And while Mahito could land a sure hit attack with his domain expansion, those are only able to target people with cursed energy. So that probably won't work on Shigaraki, unless you want to say that Mahito's domain expansion would instead target people by their soul. In that case, then I guess Mahito could win if he just started the fight with it, which isn't really in character. At the end of the day, this is a lot of ifs because it's impossible to give a proper answer. Then again, you can probably just say Mahito wins since he's a curse and Shigaraki wouldn't be able to see him. I kinda ignored that factor because it really makes for a boring video, but that's the video as far as I can present it. Although if you did like the video, do be sure to like and subscribe and comment your own thoughts below. I would love to hear them. But before signing off, it's time to talk about this video's sponsor, me. I already made a video talking about it, but for the past few months, I have been producing an animation of Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen versus Makima from Chainsaw Man. One of the coolest matchups of modern shonen, and it's our intention to show it. It'll be in traditional 2D animation as you're all used to with both shows, and this is backed by some amazing animators that I have brought onto the project. But unfortunately, we can't do this alone, so if you want to support the project, sign up for the Patreon to get a look behind the scenes like character sheets, storyboards, and all kinds of fun stuff. Or if you want to donate a specific amount, we also have a Ko-Fi available, links in the description below. If this all sounds cool to you, be sure to check them out and keep up with the updates. Also, shout out to our Honored 1 tier patrons. Thank you so much for your support. But that's the video, so take care and have a good one.